this is chapter 18, Investigating the Environment, and it goes hand in hand with the investigation of the utilities and energy in chapter 17. So in this chapter, it talks about how we need to be conscious and aware of the environment as journalists and understand what's happening to it and how we can report on what's happening to the environment. So there's many different ways and places that we can go to find information about the environment, and the first one is kind of on the so a good place to start is the government regulatory offices, and there's different levels of that. There's the federal level with the Environmental Protection Agency, and there you can find documents and get a story by browsing their website and reading their annual and periodic reports about what's happening and what's being reported, or maybe what's not being reported. It also journalists can also investigate pollution in their local communities and find that on the databases as well. So there's also the National Law Journal documented the sighting of hazardous waste dumps. It talked about how this journal found a lot of low-income and minority neighborhoods were reported with having a lot of hazardous waste. And so that's just an example of a reporter talking about that situation in regards to the environment. Other agencies, there's the executive branch, as they called it, agencies which include the Army Corps of Engineers, the Council on Environmental Quality, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commissions, and there's also different bureaus and offices within the Agriculture, Energy, and Interior Departments, and then there's also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, and that can give you a lot of good information. An example in the book, there was a story in the Times in New Orleans that won an award because they looked up information about how the world's fish supply was being threatened, and they were able to report on that. Also, within the legislative branch, there's lots of House Public Works and Transportation committees that keep records on environmental matters, so you can find information through them as well. So like I said before, journalists can check into their own communities by examining toxic release inventory, and that's kept by the EPA as well, and is a good resource. So we need to be investigating on our communities and making sure that everything, is all right. And usually there's things that are amiss, and we need to be figuring out why and reporting on those things. So we can find out this information through the toxic release inventory, and we can also find it out through the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act. And this helps us get that information. One thing that we can report on is air pollution, and how under the Federal Clean Air Act in the EPA, we can go to the regional offices and get information from pollution agencies about locations of hazardous substances and emissions from specific work sites. So if there's a big up-and-coming company, we can look them up and see how much they're, emitting into the environment, air pollution-wise. Also, we can go to AIRS, which stands for Aerometric Information Retrieval Systems, and there's a lot of information about facilities, geography, and pollutants. Journalists can also use the air database search tool to gather information and the air from the air quality system and the national emissions inventory. So not only is there the air pollution that we can report on, and pollution in general, there's also water pollution. And with this comes the Clean Water Act, so we want to make sure that that's being upheld. So in investigating water pollution, a newspaper said that you can reveal, quote, a disregard for safety of private wells, weak regulation of public water systems, and widespread problems with lead testing, end quotation. So we can find out lots of different things, and newspapers there's lots of examples in Chapter 18 of good reporting on water pollution. Now, there's also the EPA's groundwater and drinking water that we can look into. That's a good starting point. It provides reports on the quality of drinking water systems. Also, we can find out through the Safe Drinking Water Information System, which is a database of public water systems and their violations. So not only can we be looking for current violations of corporations, but we can see and look back on their previous violations and see if they're still doing something wrong and if they're not correcting those problems. There's also the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System program, which is available on the EPA website as well. And then the worst hazardous waste sites are on the national priorities list, and as of the beginning of the 21st century, the book states that there's 1,200 sites on the list that talk about, major hazardous waste problems. We can also talk about get information from the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, which was of 1980, and the purpose was to identify, seal off, and clean up sites that were laced with toxic waste. I'm getting a lot of my information from Chapter 18. It's pretty basic information, but it gives you a lot of sources to go to if you have, an environmental beat that you're investigating constantly. So there's a lot of information out there, a lot of good things that we can get to as public. We have the right to get access to these things. We just don't know it. So we need to be taking advantage of all of these different programs that are talked about that can give you information on the environment so that we can really give the public information about what's going on in the environment and be reporting on that.